So I got a question from Mark Jacobs. The question was, tech got hammered and it makes up a lot of the S&P 500. How do I diversify out of this? Now, I'm going to say before we do anything, trying to change your portfolio when the heat hits is one of the worst decisions you can make. You are literally asking for a disaster. So be very careful trying to make changes because of emotion. Now, with that being said, let's actually open up an S&P 500 ETF to show you kind of the layout of what he's referring to first. So if I open on the screen here, VU, you'll see VU is the S&P 500 ETF through Vanguard. Now, if I go down to the portfolio allocation or distribution, you can see that tech, what he's referring to in his question, is making up 31% of this ETF. So when I put $100 in, that means $31 goes into the tech sector. So if the tech sector gets crushed, so does my portfolio. And so people do not understand the key concept of investing, and a lot of them think the S&P 500 is the only route, but a good investor knows it is much bigger than that, because if it was that easy, everybody would just do it, right? So I'm going to share 2 stats on the screen right now that show you why you should not be making a bunch of moves in the heat of the moment. So the very first one, as you can see, the S&P 500 index with a $20,000 investment from 1979 to 2022, essentially, right? Now, as you can see in the top left, it says 8 of the 10 worst performing days happened within 1 week of the 10 best performing days. The short of it is you're not going to guess, so don't try to guess. You're going to get wrong, and if you think you're going to be right, you just have a massive ego that needs to be controlled of some sort. But you're going to lose the game by trying to time the market. It is impossible, no matter what any guru online tells you. So as you can see, if we started with $20,000, if I miss the 60 best days over that entire period, we're talking, let's call it 40 plus years, 43 years, my return would be $103,000. Now, if I missed, as you go down the line, 50 best days, 40 best days, 30 best days, 20 best days, it's still a significant portion off of, if I didn't do anything, and I stayed the course, my return would have been almost 12%, and my actual dollar value of that 20,000 would have turned into $2.2 million. But if I tinkered with my portfolio and I missed those 5 best days, and remember, 8 of the 10 worst performing days happened within 1 week of the 10 best performing days, my portfolio would have dropped from 2.2 to $1.3 million. We're talking an $800,000 difference by missing 5 of the best days over a 43-year period. You're not going to guess, so don't try. Another really, really important stat, as you'll see on the screen right now, over the last 40 years, the 10 best days out of more than 10,000 days accounted for almost 2/3 of the stock market return for that period. So you're not going to be the investor that picks the right days at the right time, and there's no reason to. You don't have to build wealth. I built a lot of wealth. My students build a lot of wealth because they do it the right way, and they don't try to time the market. They don't listen to the next trader online. They do it the fundamental way. So like I said before, selling during bad times is literally writing your death wish, and you should not be doing that. And so to answer Mark's question, there are 4 things specifically I would do in order to take care of this question of how do I diversify outside of the S&P 500? Number 1 is I'm going to graph my current portfolio on an Excel template. I'm going to give you a free Excel template that graphs out all of your portfolio allocations amongst all of your accounts, because they could be all over the place. And so I want you to go ahead and graph everything out so that you can see. As you can see on the screen right now, there will be a portfolio allocation model by account specifically. So if you have different accounts, that's totally fine. Just go ahead and update your account name. I just did examples. And then as you can go through there, it will actually go over into your retirement portion and then also non-retirement portion based on the highlights and the formulas I have built into this model. Now, all you have to do is enter in your information. It should automate, but if you have different accounts, if you have multiple funds, you're gonna have to change it. You're gonna have to edit, and I'm not going to teach you how to do the Excel side of things, and you should be able to figure that one out. However, if you see the overall portfolio, the retirement portfolio and non-retirement portfolio broken out by investment fund, you now know your portfolio allocation, because I need to first know, step 1, where do I currently sit? Now, the second step is to take a risk profile quiz. I'm gonna give you a Charles Schwab risk profile quiz in the show notes below. This is not the only quiz, so I highly recommend to take multiple quizzes. However, this is a good starting point. So once you answer the questions, let me talk about answering those questions specifically. Answer the questions in the emotional state that you would be in if you lost a job, if you had something really detrimental happening to you, maybe you got divorced. There was some big moment where there's actually emotions, because most times when it comes to risk with investments, it's those moments that actually derail a portfolio. It's not on Friday afternoon drinking your coffee answering these questions. So politely, it's actually when life gets tough, and that's when the average investor becomes the average investor. So we want to put ourselves in that mental state that if something crazy happened, how would I react based on the questions that are being asked of me? The other thing to consider is when you're answering these questions, think of these and do these for each individual investment account, because the way you answer the questions are going to be different depending on the type of account you have. Now, once you answer those questions, it's going to tell you what type of risk profile you have naturally from answering the questions for that particular investment account. It will then tell you or give you an idea of a general investment framework with an allocation. Now, as you can see on the screen, there's a 5% clip at a minimum of cash. Now, I would take that 5% and move it into large cap for all of these models here on the screen, but Charles Schwab does that because they make money in your cash, so just be aware. However, also, you might not understand what large cap equity, small cap equity, international equity, fixed income means, but I give you the exact ticker symbol, and these are just ETFs. There's multiple out there through Vanguard specific ETFs that would match up. So if I had large cap equity, as you can see on the screen, VOO would be a large cap equity type of ETF. A small cap equity ETF would be VB. So if I see one of these models, let's say for example, the moderately aggressive one, as you can see, it says 45% large cap equity. My portion of that would be VOO 45%. My 15% small cap equity would be VB, and my 20% international equity would be VXUS. And then obviously the remainder 15% fixed income would be BND. Just to give you an idea, of course, those are not investment recommendations. Those are just an example of what that means and how that translates to the real world. And if you want to learn more about the investment allocations, go click in the top right-hand corner and I'll show you how to get to the exact allocations for you specifically. Okay, so now you know where you sit. You've taken a quiz of where you probably ideally should be, but I want you to do one more thing with your current portfolio. In the show notes below, I'm going to give you another link. So this link is going to be a portfolio visualizer backtest portfolio. So within this, you can enter your exact ticker symbols in here. And I'm going to give you an example on the screen right now. So this exact portfolio is a 4-fund portfolio, super basic portfolio, 40% to the total stock market, 20% to the total international market, 10% to real estate fund, and then 30% to the total bond market. When you enter this in there, it's going to tell you a few key data points. So as you can see, this specific portfolio from the time it was tested is a 7.5% return, generally speaking. But here's the kicker, and this is what people miss out, and this is why Mark's asking the question initially is like, how do I diversify? Because tech's getting hammered, my portfolio is getting hammered, and I don't really like what I feel right now. The drawdown is almost up to 40%, meaning at one point during the time of holding this type of portfolio, your portfolio value, let's say it was $1 million, would have dropped to 40%. Are you willing to stomach that? Obviously, the average return is 7.4%. But not everybody can stomach that. And this is exactly why I'm having this video, and exactly why Mark asked this question, is because we have to align a portfolio with something that makes sense for us. And if we don't do this, it is going to be soul crushing. It's going to write our death wish for us, and we are going to be the average investor. The average investor over the last 20 years has performed at 3%, almost barely beating inflation. Actually, debatably not beating inflation. Whereas the S&P 500 was at like 9.5%. So we have to make sure that we are not the average investor. Unfortunately, the law of averages play out that most of people listening right now are. But because we have the $7 investing course in the show notes below, you can go do that and not be the average investor right this second. So I highly recommend pause everything, go down in the show notes below, get the $7 5-day course. It will walk you through how to be an expert when it comes to investing. And it will start with layman's terms and end with layman's terms and get you invested today. So the fourth step is to actually find investments that fit your current risk model and also your risk profile. So this is exactly where the portfolio visualizer backtest portfolio comes into play so much. So I'm going to show you an adjusted risk profile adjustment here, because this is really, really helpful to actually understand and see. So obviously, as you know, stocks are more risky. Obviously, large cap are less risky than mid cap, and mid cap are less risky than small cap. And then obviously fixed income is less risky in total. So as we play with these percentages, we can actually see the adjusted risk returns in our portfolio that we have. So as you see on the screen right now, we have an adjustment to this portfolio. So the only changes that have happened. So we shifted from a 40% total stock market to a 20%, and we shifted that full 20% over to the total bond fund to make that 50%. But as you can see, the difference of this portfolio has changed drastically. So the average return is not as big as it once was. However, the drawdown has cut in half. And so for somebody that isn't willing to take on the potential huge swings or volatility in a portfolio, this might be a better suited portfolio for you. Now, this is just an example, guys. My point is, use this tool I'm providing in the show notes below to literally concoct a portfolio that actually aligns with the ability to take on as much risk as possible to get the best return without jumping out of your seat, because that's what it comes down to. And so you're not the average investor. And this is a very important concept. So to recap the question, tech got hammered and there was a large percentage of the S&P 500 that had technology exposure. So Mark was concerned in how to diversify. We walked through 4 key steps. Number 1 was graphing your current portfolio using the document in the show notes below. Number 2 was to take a risk profile quiz, show notes below as well. We use a Charles Schwab one, but do multiple, of course. Number 3 is use a portfolio visualizer backtest tool, show notes below, go use it. And then number 4 is to go find the right investments using the portfolio visualizer tool to adjust your risk that aligns with you as a person. And number 5 is to make sure that you go get the $7 investing course to start today so you're not confused and you know how to apply this. And I will see you guys next Monday.